Rome had already been saved. The man who saved it was still alive. Then Rome killed him, not in battle, not by an enemy sword, not after a defeat or a betrayal. In a palace, in the middle of the afternoon, by the hand of the emperor he had spent his life protecting. Within 20 years there was no Rome left to save. History remembers Attila. It should remember Aetius. Drawn from history. That is the story. Everything else is the details of how a civilization looked at the man keeping it alive and decided he was too dangerous to keep. By the 5th century, the Western Empire was not a civilization anymore. It was the idea of one. The legions were shadows. The treasury was empty. Province after province had been lost, not broken all at once, but worn down year by year, until the map that had once shown Roman red from Britain to Mesopotamia now looked more like a wound. The emperors sat in Ravenna, having long since abandoned Rome itself, surrounded by men who competed for influence over rulers, who understood almost nothing about what was happening beyond the palace walls. Rome wasn't falling. It had already fallen. It simply hadn't accepted it yet. Into that collapsing world, one man had spent decades doing something that should have been impossible, holding together a dying empire through intelligence, patience, and relationships nobody else could replicate. What Aetius carried wasn't a sword. It was everything Rome had left, and he carried it alone. As a young man, Aetius had been sent as a diplomatic hostage, first to the Visigoths, then to the Huns. Not months, years. Long enough to learn languages, form genuine friendships, and understand the people Rome feared well enough to work with them, rather than simply against them. He returned knowing something no other Roman general knew. The enemy was not a category. The enemy was people. He rose through Roman military life with a combination of talent and political skill that made enemies almost as quickly as it made allies. He hired Hunnic mercenaries when Rome needed them. He managed Gothic kings through honest dealing that most Roman diplomats couldn't have attempted. He understood that the barbarian kingdoms weren't going to disappear, and that Rome's survival depended on learning to coexist with forces it could no longer defeat outright. He kept the plates spinning for decades, mostly alone. Then came Attila. Not a political crisis, not a military setback, something larger. By the 440s, Attila had become something the ancient world struggled to categorize. He was not simply a conqueror, he was inevitable, a force that moved with the absolute certainty of something that has never been stopped, and therefore cannot imagine what stopping would feel like. He had broken the Eastern Roman Empire's will to resist. He had extracted tribute on a scale that amounted to economic strangulation. His reputation preceded his armies like a weapon. Cities surrendered before he arrived, not from cowardice, but from a rational assessment of mathematics that made resistance look like suicide. And now he turned west, into Gaul, burning everything, not from rage, not from ideology, but with the methodical completeness of a winter storm, because that is simply what winter storms do. Aetius understood something the court in Ravenna did not. This was not a crisis to be managed. This was civilization's final examination. He had known Attila personally. They had overlapped in the Hunnic world during those years of hostage diplomacy, in the way that men of similar intelligence always find each other in close quarters, which meant he knew exactly how impossible the next months were going to be. What followed was not a military campaign. It was a negotiation with reality, a sustained effort to assemble a coalition from the wreckage of Rome's relationships with people it had spent centuries alternately conquering and betraying. The Visigoths were the essential piece. Without them, there was nothing capable of facing Attila in the field. Aetius went to their king Theodoric. He did not pretend. He did not offer gifts and flattery. He told Theodoric the truth, that an Attila who destroyed Rome would turn toward the Visigoths next, and that the only way either of them survived was together. Theodoric looked at the man across from him, someone who had never lied to him, someone whose credibility had been built over years of honest dealing. He agreed. For one day, enemies became allies because one man convinced them survival mattered more than history. June 451, the Catalaunian Plains. Hundreds of thousands of men, multiple nations, languages spoken across that field that had never been spoken on the same ground simultaneously. And at the center, two men who had once known each other in the Hunnic steppes, now standing on opposite sides of the largest battle anyone alive had ever seen. Aetius positioned the Visigoths on the high ground before Attila's cavalry could take it. That decision, made in the pre-dawn hours, in the quiet before the killing started, may have been the most important single choice in the history of Western civilization. The fighting lasted the entire day. Theodoric died in it, leading from the front, the way Visigoth kings were expected to lead. His son took command. The coalition held. When nightfall came, Attila had retreated to his camp. He had not broken through. The man who had never been stopped had been stopped. Aetius stood on that field as the sun went down, surrounded by the dead of half a dozen nations, and felt something that was not quite triumph. The cost was too visible, the exhaustion ran too deep, and somewhere in the back of his mind, because he understood everything, he already knew this was not the end. It was the beginning of a different kind of danger. He let Attila leave. The coalition was too fragile to sustain a pursuit. A cornered Attila might fight with desperation that even a winning army cannot absorb. These reasons were real, but there was another. One Aetius never stated, perhaps never fully admitted to himself. A living Attila was a problem that required him. A dead Attila was a problem solved, and men whose problems are solved become expendable. Attila came back the following year. Italy. More cities burned, more of what remained consumed. He turned back eventually. Disease in his camp, threats from the east, the practical limits of even the most unstoppable force. He died in 453. His empire fractured immediately. The existential threat was gone. Rome had survived. Aetius had 2 years left to live. The emperor was Valentinian III. He was not cruel. He was insecure, and insecure rulers fear capable men more than foreign armies. With Attila gone, Valentinian looked at his empire and saw something that frightened him more than any barbarian army. Aetius. The whispers began. Aetius is too powerful. He is the real emperor. Whether Valentinian believed them no longer mattered. He acted as though he did. September 21st, 454 AD. Aetius came to the palace to discuss military finances, a routine meeting, the kind of administrative work that managing what remained of Roman military power required constantly. He had done this hundreds of times. He came as he always came, as a servant of Rome, carrying information his emperor needed. Trusting that the relationship built over decades meant something, he trusted because he had never stopped trusting. That was the thing about Aetius the court never fully understood. He had seen every form of betrayal Roman politics could produce. And in the deepest part of himself, he still believed in the institution he served. Not Valentinian, not the court, Rome. The idea of it, the thing worth saving. He walked into that room believing he was saving it still. He had survived barbarians. He never imagined he would not survive Rome. Valentinian stood up from his throne. He began screaming accusations, treason, conspiracy, ambition that had crossed the line into something unforgivable. Aetius tried to respond. He had decades of loyalty. He had the Catalaunian Plains. It wasn't enough. Valentinian drew his sword. His attendants joined in. The man who had stopped Attila, who had built the coalition that saved Western civilization, who had held together a dying empire through intelligence and will and relationships that had taken a lifetime to construct, died on a palace floor. Killed by the emperor, he had never stopped serving. A Roman senator, hearing what had happened, said only this:
I do not know what his purpose was. I know only that he has cut off his right hand with his left.
Within months, Valentinian himself was dead, killed by two of Aetius's former bodyguards, who had watched what happened to their commander and drawn their own conclusions. Then the collapse accelerated. The alliances died with Aetius. The men who trusted him had no reason to trust those who came after. Without him, they required armies. Rome didn't have armies anymore. It had had Aetius. Rome did not fall. Rome let go. It let go the moment Valentinian stood up from his throne. History remembers Attila as the destroyer of Rome. He wasn't. What Rome could not survive was itself. Could not survive the particular fear that power generates in people who feel they don't deserve it. Could not survive a small man on a throne who looked at the person keeping him alive and felt, instead of gratitude, the terror that greatness always inspires in smallness. Aetius didn't fall because he failed. He fell because he succeeded so completely that success became threatening. And here is what history keeps trying to tell us. The thing Rome learned too late and civilizations keep forgetting. The greatest threat to any society is never the enemy outside its walls. It is the fear inside its own rooms. The moment a civilization begins destroying its most capable people because those people have become inconvenient, that is the moment the walls stop mattering. The enemy outside doesn't need to break through. They only need to wait. Attila waited, and Rome handed him its future on a palace floor, not out of weakness, out of fear. That is the part of this story that refuses to stay in the 5th century. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please subscribe and leave a like. You can also write in the comments which historical topics you'd like to see next. See you in the next video.